doing? We got it. All righty. Okay, so welcome. Let's pick it up where we left off, which is forward to the third edition. It's page XXII. So if you're looking to find it, forward to the third edition, XXII. And again, what are we doing as we go through these forewords? What we're looking to do is we're looking to see really the importance of this book. And the forewords are telling us why we go through this book line by line and why we're doing this, you know? And forward to the third edition, I got a fun fact about the forward to the third edition that is not fun, but it is a fact. And so that is that this is the first forward not written by Bill Wilson. That is true. What makes it not fun is because this was written in 76 and he passed in 71. So he was not with us to write it. Kind of a bummer to start the big book study on. Glad you're here. Woo! All right, so forward to the third edition. So by March 1976, when this edition went to the printer, the total worldwide membership of Alcoholics Anonymous was conservatively estimated. So we're not doing what Bill liked to do, which was pump the numbers a little. We're saying, okay, it's, we're gonna underestimate ourselves. So conservatively estimated at more than 1 million, with almost 28,000 groups meeting in over 90 countries. Surveys of groups in the United States and Canada indicate that AA is reaching out to not only to more and more people, but to a wider and wider range. And if you remember, as we're going through the preface, we were talking about what has changed in this book. Well, the directions on how to get well have not changed. The diagnostic criteria to diagnose myself as an alcoholic or to diagnose myself as whatever brings you to this study today, to diagnose myself has not changed. But what has changed has been the stories. Because this book was meant to go out to the world and carry this message. And I needed to see that there were people like me. So not only have more and more people began to recover, but a wider variety of human beings. So it says women now make up more than 1/4 of the membership, which I will point out is in 1976. 2024, not great numbers. 1976, not bad. That's fair. Like we're aiming for inclusion, And then it says among newer members, the proportion is nearly 1/3. Which, by the way, 1/3 bigger than 1/4. I know some of you are like, could you avoid doing math in the forewords, please? You're just bringing up all my high school. Yeah, stop it. But 1/3's bigger than 1/4. And it says 7% of the AA surveyed are less than 30 years of age, among them many in their teens. And you know what? The only really awful thing about about getting sober young is that I passed being in my 30s. You get here under 30 and you like just, well, I'm over 30, and you see 30 in the rearview mirror. So. And then among them, many in their teens. I got here in my early 20s. And if you're worried about that, what I want you to know is don't. I was an efficient sort of alcoholic and drug addict. I burnt my life to the ground real efficiently. I took my life and turned it into a dumpster that was on fire quite quickly. Got hopeless early on. So don't you worry about that. And so it says the basic principles of the AA program, it appears. And I'm just going to point something out. Now, a lot of times we talk about the principles as nebulous sort of concepts, like a principle of hope or faith or courage or trust or honesty or integrity or brotherly love or justice. And if that's your sort of view on the principles, what I want you to know is you are right. I always want to emphasize something. If I say something and you're like, I disagree with that, you're right. I'm wrong. And I will say, come join me, though. It's fun over here being wrong. But how I like to look at the spiritual principles is a little bit different than often how we hear it described. And I just like to share this. So the principles, I don't take as the nebulous concepts behind the steps. For me, the spiritual principles are the tangible actions of the steps, which is, oh, that's something I can practice in all my affairs. You know what I mean? I was just out in Ontario, and Ontarianians, not a fan of the traffic. You can tell they got some traffic. And we got some Ontarianians here. Welcome. You're like, we are from Toronto. Don't call us Ontarianians. But we got some people from Ontario. And listen, you guys know what it's like to sit on the 401. Unless you're fancy and you're on the 407 with the transponder. I know what's up. But you guys know what it's like to sit in gridlock. Oh, Ben, you're in California. You know, traffic, right? You ever sat in traffic and been able to just throw some tolerance at it? No. No, I got to take some action. You know what I mean? Yeah, St. Thomas, welcome. You guys got the elephant. Sorry, focus. Yeah, welcome. Glad you guys are here. I love that. I know, it's like, Paige, you took us already on a math tangent. Now you're going to do a geography one. I know, it's problematic already. All right. St. Thomas, they got the elephant and they got all the railroads. I know a thing. Just love little fun facts. All righty. So it says the basic principles. And for me, the principles are the tangible actions of the steps, because that is something that I can practice. That is something that I can bring to a situation. And so it makes sense that it's saying the 12 steps, these actions, it appears, holds good for individuals with many different lifestyles. So for a variety of human beings, you know, we're trying to say, I'm sure I'm the only one that came here. No, I'm different. I'm not like you. And we're saying, no, we're like trying to overcome that difference. Even you, even like me that thinks I'm different, we can recover. So it says so for individuals with many different lifestyles, just as the program, again, when we talk about what is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, what is the program of Cocaine Anonymous, Drug Addicts Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, the program is the 12 steps. And not that there's anything wrong with meetings. Fellowship is delightful. Getting involved in service and getting a commitment can be so incredibly helpful. But what is the program? The program is the tangible actions of the steps taken out of this book. So just as the program has brought recovery to those of many different nationalities. And there's something that I found. You don't have to be a spiritual seeker. I'm a nerd. I'm sure nobody is shocked by that information at this point. Even if this is your first time here, welcome. I'm glad you're here. You're like, oh, she's a weirdo. She's a nerd. But I love seeking spiritually, and I love seeking from a variety of practices, and like I'm like trying to learn different faiths, traditions, and all of that sort of stuff. And you know, one of the things that I have found is that if it is truth, and I mean truth, I don't mean that truth that I was telling people when I got here, you know, I mean, if it is deep and profound spiritual truth, you can find it anywhere. Like this thing, what we've stumbled upon here in Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, here in 12 Step, what we have found is deep spiritual truth. And that's why this can resonate with people from different backgrounds, different ages, different cultures, different beliefs, different parts of the world. There is something here that works, and it is because it is truth. So the 12 steps that summarize the program, see, it's written to summarize the course of action, may be called Los 12 Pesos. I am so sorry if there's anyone who can speak Italian and are like, that is not how you pronounce that. That's my bad. And it's going to get worse for any people that speak French in one country. Or no, that one's Spanish. Sorry, that's Spanish. Los 12 Pesos. Although Spanish and Italian are similar, they have a different length. Focus. Sorry, les 12 étapes. That is French, and that means 12 steps. So what it's saying is the 12 steps in one country and the 12 steps in another. But they trace exactly the same path to recovery that was blazed by the earliest members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I just want to point out that this is a path. This is not a vacation destination. I know those of you in the UK are like, girl, I could go to Ibiza, you know, or maybe not. Stay away from Ibiza. It's a bit of a party place. But you know what I mean? Like, oh, Vacation destination, absolutely not. This is a path. This is a way of life. I am never done. And it says, in spite of the great increase in the size and span of this fellowship, at its core, it remains simple and personal each day. Somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic, or whatever brings you to the study, talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength, and hope. And I'm going to break something down. When we talk about experience, strength, and hope, what am I sharing my experience with? Well, I've got to share my experience with my illness. So for me, I'm an alcoholic. I'm an addict. I'm helpful to have some experience with that to share with other alcoholics and addicts. So I have to share that experience. But I also need to have experience that I can share with our program of action, these 12 steps. And I also need to have some experience, hopefully, with the solution. And our solution is a spiritual awakening. And when I share strength, I can assure you guys, it is not my strength. You know what I'm saying? Came here hopeless, came here powerless. It's not mine, you know? And hope. Listen, I was not a hopeful sort of alcoholic when I got here. You know, I was not brimming with hope. The hope is not my hope. The strength is not my strength. It is a hope and strength that flows through me as I begin to and continue to access a relationship with a power that is on offer. Hopefully that makes sense. And if not, just do the stuff and it will. Like if you ever, because when I got here, I would hear things and I would be like, that makes no effing sense. Are you out of your mind? And I might be. The jury's still out of that. But I would hear people who would share things and it just didn't make sense. And if there are things that I hear that I can't quite put my finger on, or they feel like paradoxes, what I found is we don't actually, this is my experience, I am wrong, so just grain of salt. There aren't that many paradoxes. There are things that are said in meetings that don't necessarily align with what's in the book, but also there are things that are what I call, I didn't make up the word, ineffable, experiential. Things that need to be experienced to be understood. So if I am like, what do you mean I got to give it away to keep it? That's not how things work. It is because I need to have this experience and see, wow, I got to share this with others. You know what I'm saying? That was the one I was like, one of the ones I was like, that makes no sense. So that's the Forward to the Third Edition, rock and roll. Let's dive into the Forward to the Fourth Edition. And I love the Forward to the Fourth Edition because I had, again, a place where I was wrong. And in that place where I was wrong, I got to have what I like to call a Forward to the Fourth Edition moment. In the Forward to the Fourth Edition, how convenient. So, Forward to the Fourth Edition. This fourth edition of Alcoholics Anonymous came off the press in November 2001 at the start of a new millennium. Since the third edition was published in 1976, worldwide membership of AA has just about doubled to an estimated 2 million or more, with nearly 100,800 groups meeting in approximately 150 countries around the world. Keep in mind, when this thing started, it was Ohio and New York. You know what I mean? And it is around the world. So again, evidence that this thing works. And it says literature has played a major role in AA's growth. So the literature is important. And this is our primary piece of literature. And it says literature has played a major role in AA's growth, and a striking phenomenon of the past quarter century. That's 25 years. I just throw that out because I didn't really, I'd read it and I wouldn't know what we were talking about. So has been the explosion of translations of our basic literature into many languages and dialects. In country after country where the AA seed was planted, it has taken root slowly at first, then growing by, oh, no worries. We are on the Forward to the fourth edition. Hopefully, let me make sure I got that. Oh, yeah, no worries. I will help you. Oh, sorry, I thought you needed the page. No worries. I saw a page and it was my name, and I read it as in page, as in a piece of paper. And listen, my name is spelled differently. I'm an alcoholic, I'm an addict, I'm self-centered, there's an I in mine. And I was like, I just saw a page and I was like, oh yeah, we're forward to the fourth edition. It's XXIII. No, they just needed my help with something. I got you after, don't you worry. Alrighty, so, oh yeah, thank you, Rob. Uh, so when we talk about the literature, what we're talking about, it says in country after country where the AA seed was planted, it has taken root slowly at first, then growing by leaps and bounds when literature, again, literature has become available. Currently, Alcoholics Anonymous, that is the title of this book. And the fellowship, Alcoholics Anonymous, is named after the book, not the other way around. That's why we emphasize that this is Alcoholics Anonymous, this book. That's how important this book is. And it's been translated into 43 languages. And so when we talk about the AA seed being planted, this is something that I like to do with my sponsees. If we're going through the book line by line, we're working together, I like to ask, if you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go? And honestly, feel free. You got to do it quickly to throw some things in the chat where you'd go. But the problem with me doing that is then it'll just the rest of the meeting will be people like planning vacations. But if you could go anywhere in the world, just imagine where you would go. Now, let's say, listen, this is not going to be a quick, like, long weekend. In fact, it's not even going to be a 2-week stay. We're going to go to your dream location in the world. And we are going Thailand. Scott's there. Love it, Scott. Love it. So Scott's like, I'm going to go to Thailand. Well, the convention in Vancouver. Yeah, yeah. Vancouver. So we got Thailand, we got Vancouver. And imagine, right? Imagine we're going to spend 6 months there, 6 months to a year, maybe more. And so we show up. And what do I know beyond a shadow of a doubt? That what I know is for me to stay well, I've got to work with others. Now, let's imagine in this hypothetical, listen, I'll even make sure airfare is covered in this hypothetical. Y'all don't have to pay for imaginary airfare or hotel. That's on me. You don't have to pay it in your imagination. You're welcome. So generous. But you're going to be there for a long, long time. And let's say that they don't have 12-step meetings. There's no AA, CA, OA, DAA, GA. There is no 12-step meetings. And I know that for me to stay well, I have got to go work with others. And so little by little, I'm going to try to find some people to work with. And that is the AA seed beginning to be planted. Some of those people are going to stay sober. They're going to work through these steps and they're going to sponsor others. And we're going to have a little meeting that grows up. You see, the seed is planted. Now, I only speak English, and that is barely. Some of you are like, we heard your best attempt at Spanish and French. You know what I mean? But I only speak English. But let's say I start working with some people who are bilingual, and they start working with some people who speak that native language. And in that, we see the seed is planted. But when this book is translated into a language that the people can read, it grows. That it begins to take off. And that's what we're talking about. You know, it is absolutely one person working with another to carry this message. But this book, man, this carries the directions on how to get well. And when it is available, it sets off. And so that is it growing by leaps and bounds. And I always like that one because we get to use our imagination, you know? And also, it's kind of the Zoom era. We're going to talk about the Zoom era. It has been the most incredible thing to be able to. I've had the privilege of being asked to speak for a number of meetings in Iran, and I, again, barely English, got the privilege of being able to speak with a translator. And that has been such a cool experience. Also, some of you are not surprised to find this piece of information. I'm a translator's nightmare. a nightmare for the poor translators. I speak too fast. I speak in metaphors. You know what I mean? I go off on tangents. I and then at the end, I would be like, thank you. Like I would just hype up the translator a whole bunch, and they were not comfortable with me having to translate nice things about themselves. But that's what we're talking about. And a really cool thing, when we talk throughout this book, we see a variety of metaphors. And some metaphors throughout the book are a little plant-based. And we talk about the AA seed a couple of times in this book. And just something that's important to understand is a seed has everything that it needs in order to grow. Everything that it needs. Everything that I need in order to grow is right here, you know? And if that gets planted and it lands in fertile soil, it will grow. But another thing that's really helpful to remember, especially if you're working with people and you're, people aren't getting well right away, or you have loved ones that are struggling, just something that is important to remember is that a seed's early growth happens underground. A seed always needs to begin by sprouting roots that grasp into the soil before it can grow where we can see it. And it's just a reminder for me, one, that I don't know that much about botany or horticulture, as if you guys have been hanging around for a while and I'm like, mushrooms, they grow in the dark, because the mushrooming process, it was in full swing. But that idea that just because I do not see the immediate results of my actions does not mean that something is not happening. And it's just that reminder. And all I'm doing is planting seeds. The seed's got everything it needs. It'd be a little rude if I kept digging it up, trying to get it to grow. You know what I'm saying? So, all right. And it says, as the message of recovery, back to the fourth edition, has reached larger numbers of people, it has also touched the lives of a vastly greater variety of suffering alcoholics. When the phrase, we are people who normally would not mix, page 17 of this book, was written in 1939, it referred to a fellowship composed largely of men. And again, I want to apologize for people my age or older, because when I got here in my early 20s, I'm like, yeah, it's a bunch of old white dudes. Not far from my age, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm so sorry. But it's all these old white dudes named Bill and Bob and another Bill and a William and a Robert. And then I always want to make this joke, a Richard or two. Little dick joke in there. Richard, see what I did? I'm a child already. So, as written in 1939, it referred to a fellowship composed largely of men and a few women. And when this book was written, it was one. It was Florence Rankin. And she, it was and women is always a hopeful and inclusive statement when I see it in this book. So it says, with quite similar social, ethnic, and economic background. Like so much of AA's basic text, again, this book is a textbook. It is one to learn from, to study. But also, I want to emphasize, I can run this like an experiment, like a science book. I can do it skeptically. I'm sure there are a lot of people who here who at some point in their lives have done homework skeptically and not enthusiastically, I can have attitude. I got to do it though. So, like so much of AA's basic text, those words have proved to be far more visionary than the founding members could have ever imagined. And what we're talking about is, I call it a forward to the fourth edition moment. It's that idea where words that were written in 1939 have proved to be more and more true as time has gone by. And so much of this book is that experience, at least for me. It says the stories added to this edition represent a membership whose characteristics of age, gender, race, culture have widened and deepened to encompass virtually everyone the first 100 members could have hoped to reach. So why did we change the stories? So that more people could say, oh, I'm like that. Maybe I could recover too. And why do I share my story? To help people relate so they could think, oh, I'm like that. Maybe I could recover too. Maybe they could help me, And it says, while our literature has preserved the integrity of the AA message, that is the purpose of the book. To prevent, we were talking, I think it was last week, we were talking about the telephone game. Yeah, because we were talking about the different hockey teams. You know, the telephone game where you go around in kindergarten or elementary school and you whisper something and it goes around and at the end it's completely different. So the integrity of the message is preserved by this literature. Again, that is the importance of this book. So while our literature has preserved the integrity of the AA message, sweeping changes in society as a whole are reflected in new customs and practices within the fellowship. Taking advantage of technological advances, for example, AA members with computers can participate in meetings online. It's happening, you guys. We're doing it. Woo! Yeah. Sharing with fellow alcoholics across the country or around the world. And I want you to know, when I first started working with people, this was a point where I would come to it in the book and I'd be like, well, you see, because I got sober well before Zoom was a thing. There were online meetings. And my experience was because I'm a person that has like a disability, I have chronic illness, I have a passion and an interest for accessibility. And I had a friend who was struggling terribly with her MS, and she wasn't able to physically get to meetings anymore. And I wasn't in too much better shape, so I wasn't able to get her there. So I remember I checked out some online meetings. Now, did I do a thorough investigation at the time? Absolutely not. I checked out two and thought, okay, I know what's going on here. Not good, made a judgment call. I know nobody's done that. It's just me. And the meetings I went to, they probably did have video meetings, because there were video meetings around a long, long time, and phone meetings around a long, long time, before COVID, before 2020. But I just found these text-based ones. And I would show up and kind of like, it was just like a little virtual chat room. And the ones I found, it was one person that was drunk and one person that was caretaking and like trying to convince them not to. And I'm like, and so I would come to this part of the book and I would be like, well, I don't know about those online meetings, and I would then sort of extol the virtues of speaker tapes. Love speaker tapes, they've always been wonderful. I always encourage them. And wouldn't you know, I was wrong. And I will say too, when we very first went online, I was like, oh man, this is going to be so awkward and uncomfortable, and I'm not going to like it. And I was right for the first 30 seconds. And then you just can't stop me. Just, yeah. Scott was attending Skype meetings back in 2011. Yeah, so I knew that they were around a long time before, but I just didn't find the right ones and made a judgment call. I know, who would do that? Judge, not us. And that's the thing is I think we find that, goodness gracious, we can recover online. We can get well online. And I don't know about you, but my experience, I was no slouch before Zoom, but it has just rocketed my recovery. And I'm hoping if you're kind of new to the Zoom thing, I'm hoping that's your experience too, the online thing. It's just been beautiful for me. And, back in the day, they would try to work over letters, help other people over letters, and that would work. So it's no surprise that we can show up and get well here. So it says, in any meeting anywhere. And so when we talk about online meetings, hey, hasn't that become more true, right? It's our Forward to the Fourth Edition moment in the Forward to the Fourth Edition. Delightful. Oh yeah, it might have. And I know telephone meetings might have been around for a long time as well. So it says, in any meeting anywhere, AA share experience. And I like to look at it, my experience with the illness, my experience with the solution, and my experience with the program of action. Share experience, strength. I'll tell you, it's not my strength, and hope, and it's not my hope. It is that hope of a power beyond myself flowing through me with each other in order to stay sober and help other alcoholics. Oh man, we haven't even hit the doctor's opinion, and it's telling us a whole bunch I got to work with others. That's annoying. It's almost like that's a big part of this thing. So it says modem to modem or face to face. AA and like in our case, we're modem to modem and face to face. You don't have to turn your camera on if you want, though. No pressure on that. It says AAs speak the language of the heart in all its power and simplicity. All right, let's dive in to the doctor's opinion. And this is a beautiful place to dive in, because what we're beginning to do is really break down what our problem is. Another way to say it is that we are diving in to really breaking down step one, beginning to understand step one. Now, the doctor's opinion is essentially two statements that were, just for our purposes, we'll say written by Dr. William D. Silkworth. And we're going to explain why we care, why when people just come in, we're like, hey, let's go through the doctor's opinion. We're going to explain it. So it says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm gonna say something controversial. Not that, whenever I say something controversial, I always then immediately follow it up with, not that controversial, because I still need you to like me. Because I've not overcome that. So it's not that controversial. But for me, I'm a big believer when it talks about the we, and of course, the original intention of the we in Alcoholics Anonymous was the first 180 members and their experience. But I'm a big believer that the more of us that follow the directions as outlined in this book and have the experiences that are outlined in this book, the more of us that are included in the we. And if you're like, that is wrong, then you're right. You're right and I'm wrong. But I'm having fun over here. I'm just throwing it out there. All right. So we of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. A couple things I want to point out. This book gives us a plan of recovery. This is where we get the directions on how to get well. But also, what is it saying? It's saying, hey, you probably want to know what doctors and scientists and smarty pants people think about this whole 12-step thing. That's what it's saying. And it says convincing testimony. And that testimony is like the people who've had experience. So convincing testimony must surely come from medical men, that means doctors, who have had experience with the sufferings of our members and have witnessed our return to health. So people who've had experience, and I really always emphasize experience, because that's what this whole thing is about. This is not an intellectual exercise. I can tell you what fancy old words mean, sometimes accurately. I can, you know what I mean? I got some head knowledge. I cannot stay sober on head knowledge. I need experience. That's what I'm after. So doctors who have had experience with the suffering of our members and have witnessed our return to health. A well-known doctor. So this is, if we're doing the who's who and the what's what, a well-known doctor who we're talking about is Dr. William D. Silkworth. Silky, as he probably would hate that I call him, you know, my homie, Silky, what's up, my guy, you know? So that's Dr. Silkworth. So he's a well-known doctor, and it says chief physician. To be a chief physician would be to be the top doctor, if that makes sense. So the head doctor, the guy in charge, you know, it's living large, he's in charge. Pew pew. I pew pew more on Mondays than I do on Fridays, which is when Terry and I pew pew a lot. Pew pew. So chief physician, he's the boss. And it says at a nationally prominent hospital. Now that nationally prominent hospital was the Towns Hospital. Towns is just spelled TOWNS, and it was a hospital, and it is specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction. Now the Towns Hospital was a hospital in New York City, and it was right across the street from Central Park. And Central Park, in those days, it had a large homeless population, a large, problem with alcoholism and drug addiction. But I will point out that the Towns Hospital was a little pricey. It was you had to pay to go there. But it was a hospital that was focused specifically on alcoholism and drug addiction. That was its sole focus. So when we talk about like, why do we care about what this doctor says? Because was anyone here following doctor's orders before you got here? You know what I mean? Right? Like I wasn't listening to doctors. Oh, listen, I'm writing a couple of my own prescriptions. I made my diagnosis. I'll take 2 more. Thank you. But chief physician specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction. So this is a doctor who focused not his entire, but the vast majority of his medical career. He was a neurologist before he began to work with us, working with alcoholics and drug addicts. He was an expert. That was his passion. That was really the thrust of the work that he was doing. I always kind of make the joke, he's not a dermatologist who saw his aunt get a little too tipsy. You know what I mean? He is focused on this thing. So he gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter. And I'm just going to point out what they're doing. What they're doing is like this appeal to logic, this appeal to authority. We're saying, here's an expert. So it says, to whom it may concern. Us, we're concerned. That's us. But it's whoever this letter goes to. I was just making a little joke, like I got here, I was all concerned about some things, but not as concerned about the things as I needed to be. I'm sure that was just me too. And it says, I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. So the number that was often or is often sort of floated around is 50,000, that he worked his career with 50,000 different alcoholics, different drug addicts. And Bill probably inflated those numbers quite a bit. It probably wasn't that many. But I just want to emphasize he was an expert. So in late 1934, I attended a patient who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. And I want to emphasize and highlight, underline hopeless. Because when we talk about the hopelessness of alcoholism, it is when I can see my hopelessness, which is the reality of my predicament, that I am able to grab a hold of the hope. Now, they don't say who this is. I'm going to tell you, it's Bill. It's Bill Wilson. That's who we're talking about. You can make a note if you're writing in your book, Bill Wilson. And what he's saying, he's like, okay, I was working with this patient, Bill, who at one point of his life, he was a competent businessman. He had made a lot of money in his life. And what he's trying to do is kind of overcome some of that stigma that like alcoholism is just for people that are not useful or can't be of society. Like he's trying to sort of explain, like, here's a guy who had alcoholism who was also a competent businessman. Like these two things can exist. So hopeless. It says in the course of his 3rd treatment. So what happened is Bill Wilson goes to rehab, Towns Hospital 2 times, gets drunk each time, and shows up a 3rd time. Anyone here ever flunk out of rehab? Flunk out of detox? Flunk out of sober living? You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm just like, hey, sometimes if you're like me, I would read these things. I'm like, I can't relate to these guys. But when we sort of break it down, what was his experience? More and more of us are able to be like, okay, yeah. So in the course of his 3rd treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. And so what we're talking about here is that he got his 3 pieces of information. So I'm gonna break this down. But I'm going to go bottom to top. I normally go top to bottom on this little handout, just because it's helpful to know. So we'll see, definitely not today. We're definitely not going to get to the cycle of alcoholism today. But on page XXVIII, and also on page 7, we see Bill Wilson go to the Towns Hospital. On page 7, we see his first hospitalization in the Towns Hospital. And there, from Dr. Silkworth, he learns of the allergy of the body, that once he starts to drink, he cannot stop. But he also, and of vital importance, learns about the mental obsession, the obsession of the mind. And how it's described to him on page 7 is it is that the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor. So that idea that when we don't have the willpower not to take that first drink, we don't have the ability to say, I'm not going to drink. And so he learns that once he starts, he cannot stop. And he learns that he does not have any mental power to not take the first drink. And he's like, awesome. Thanks, Silky. Thanks, my guy, my dude, my homester. What up? And he goes off and he drinks again. He's like, I got self-knowledge. Self-knowledge didn't work. And in Bill's story, I guess he went to the hospital 2 more times, but in Bill's story, it points out he goes 1 more time. It merged those 2 hospitalizations together. And he's lying in his hospital bed, and he overhears Dr. Silkworth talking to his wife, and Dr. Silkworth is like, Bill's not going to make it. He's going to die of alcoholism. If you can afford it, I would strongly encourage you to lock him up, put him away in an asylum. And what he learns is the grave nature of alcoholism. He learns that this is fatal. And he tries to stay sober on fear. So we can look and we can ask ourselves, hey, did I ever try to stay sober on self-knowledge? Did I ever do a lot of research into my alcoholism, my addiction, my compulsive behaviors? Did I, get a lot of head knowledge? Did that try to keep me sober? Did that not work? We can look at what did I try to stay sober on fear? Have I had terrifying, frightening experiences? Did I try to scare myself straight? Or did people try to scare me straight? And that wasn't enough, and he drank again. And so at that moment, Bill Wilson knows what his problem is. He knows that he's got a physical allergy, and he knows he's got a mental obsession. Now he's drinking, and his old drinking buddy shows up to New York City, and it's a man by the name of Ebby Thatcher. Now, Ebby Thatcher, they used to drink. They were old buddies. They were homies. Ebby Thatcher was 2 months sober, and Bill's like, "What? What's going on?" And Ebby Thatcher explains from his own experience. He was standing trial. He was on trial for a crime, and a buddy of his by the name of Roland Hazard showed up, and by a series of events was able to get him off. If he had the ability to work with him, to take him through a series of actions. Now, Roland Hazard, he was this wealthy guy. He had money, but he could not stay sober. He saw the best of the best of the best in the United States and couldn't stay sober. And he goes to visit Dr. Carl Jung to work with him intensively. We see this on page 26. You don't have to pop there if you don't want to. And he works intensively with Dr. Carl Jung. Anyone ever do intensive treatment? Well, here's what happened to Roland. He relapsed. And he goes back to Carl Jung and he says, dude, what the heck? And Carl Jung says, what you need is a spiritual awakening. And in that moment, Roland Hazard knows what our solution is. So our solution in 12 steps is a spiritual awakening. And Roland Hazard is like, well, how do I get it? And Dr. Carl Jung is like, I was trying to give it to you, but I've never been successful with an alcoholic like you. You've got to go out and find it. And what was growing in popularity at that time was a movement that was known as the Oxford Group. And the Oxford Group had nothing to do with alcoholism. They had everything to do with a series of actions that any human being could take that would produce a deep experience of God. That's what they were about. And Roland Hazard was like, I need one of those. So he gets involved with the Oxford Group. And the program of action that they had later became what is our 12 steps. And so Roland Hazard, he's beginning to stay sober. And he shows up, and Ebby Thatcher, remember, he's standing trial, and he gets Ebby Thatcher off, and he works with Ebby Thatcher, taking him through this course of action. And so Ebby Thatcher now has knowledge of what our solution is, which is the spiritual awakening. He has the program of action, how we get to that spiritual awakening, which later became our 12 steps. And Ebby Thatcher goes and he carries that message to Bill Wilson, who had previously worked with Dr. Silkworth. And in that moment, Bill Wilson has the 3 pieces of information. He knows what his problem is. He knows what the solution is. and he knows how to get it. So the problem, physical allergy, mental obsession, the solution, a spiritual awakening. And how we get it, how we get from the problem to the solution, what is our program of action? It is the 12 steps. So when it talks about in the book, in the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas. That is the 3 pieces of information: the problem, the solution, and the program of action. And then it goes on to say, as part of his rehabilitation, so as part of him staying well, he commenced to present his conception to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. What are we talking about? 12-step work. So as part of Bill Wilson getting well, he tried to carry this message to others, telling them, hey man, you've got to work with others too. So it's annoying. We're definitely not going to break down the physical allergy. That's going to be a next week thing. Stay tuned. And it's telling us, again, we got to work with others, that is a part of this deal, carrying this message. And I always emphasize it, because just so when I'm working with sponsees, it's not a surprise. So that when we get to step 12, they're not like, what? And because it talks about it throughout the book, and it's kind of my job is to help point that out for them, But I also want to emphasize, if you're somebody that's here today and you're not sponsoring others, and you're afraid to sponsor others, and maybe you've been sober a little while and you're like, I don't, Paige, I don't know. And I talk about sponsoring others and you feel that shame. What I want you to know, and like, I'm genuinely not here to shame anyone. I want you to know our job, or my job, not our job. Let's all join. But my job, stop handing out jobs. My job is to help you. My job when I sponsor people is to help them not just work these steps as a way of life, but to sponsor them into sponsorship, to work with them so that they are able to work with others. And that is my hope as we go through this book, is that, like, as we go through, that you guys, and I know listen, when I work with sponsees, we meet like every day, a couple hours a day. So it's going a lot faster than this. But my hope is that when we're done the doctor's opinion, you feel like, okay, you know what? I could sit down with somebody. I could take them through the doctor's opinion. Like, that is my hope. So if you're like, I don't know about sponsoring, like, I've got to really get this thing, to get that freedom. But like, I want you to know, like, let's help. Like, I want to help you do it. I don't want to shame you for not, And Scott said, hold on. Sponsorship works best for everyone when it's understood from the outset that the purpose of sponsorship is to show other people to sponsor. As a byproduct, symptoms are relieved, but that's not the point. Absolutely. Yeah. If we look at, like, honestly, if all I do is I seek to work these steps as a way of life and help others, I don't got to worry about not drinking. I don't got to worry about, like, don't take the first drink. I just got to worry about where would God have me be and how would God have me serve, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe. So it says this has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. A couple of things I want to point out. If it is a rapidly growing fellowship, what that means is 2 things. One, it works. And 2, it does not take long to get well. If it is working rapidly, it does not take long to have a spiritual experience. It does not take long to work the steps. So rapidly growing fellowship, and of these men, so the alcoholics, and their families. Because early on, in those early days, it wasn't just, like, oftentimes we don't get to meet their families, or if we meet their families, yeah, thank God for Abby. And that's the thing. None of these co-founders, sorry, I'm mid-sentence on a tangent. None of these co-founders were perfect. None of these early AA people were perfect. Abby, Rob will tell you, look, he maybe didn't have the best motives. He was a bit of a moocher. And I know nobody relates to wanting to get something for nothing. Nobody here relates to that. But whenever we like read the history and we're like, oh, Hank was a jerk, or what about Clarence? He smelt bad. I don't think that's even a little bit true. I don't know what that is. There's some people in Cleveland who want to have some words with me for saying that. I'm like, I love you guys there. But like God uses imperfect people. And so I don't got to be perfect to work with others. I don't got to be perfect to sponsor others. I don't have to have the best. Listen, if I'm sponsoring others so that Paige stops nagging me, that's a good enough reason. You know what I mean? That's a good enough reason. I don't have to be perfect. This book meets us where we're at. God meets me where I'm at. And we just got to show up with the desire to help them through the actions as described in this book. So we also worked with their families. That was the sentence that I was trying to finish, and I didn't. We also worked with their families. And this is a really cool theme that we will see later on in some of the later chapters. In working with others, it gave us direction on how to approach gives us directions on how to approach the family. And we don't do that so much anymore, but it is a beautiful, beautiful thing to begin to see a whole family get well. Because if I'm in a family, and I have a family, even though I'm the only one that drinks, everyone is affected by my alcoholism. I'm the only one, I will promise you, I am the only one in the family that smoked crack. They were all affected by that, like a lady, pinkies up, like a lady. All right. So it says this man and over 100 others appear to have recovered. There's that word again, recovered. And I want to emphasize that recovered does not mean cured. Recovered means the obsession, that thought that I have to take the first drink, first drug, first hit, first high, first compulsive actions, all of that, right? That is relieved, and relieved as the result of taking this course of action. That is what it means to be recovered. Now, it says, I personally know scores of cases who were of the type with whom other methods had failed completely. So if I'm here today, what I want to emphasize is we can ask ourselves, hey, did I try other methods? And I want to point some out. If you're hanging out here today, they probably failed completely. You know what I mean? If I'm trying to diagnose myself with this thing, if I'm trying to figure out, do I have this illness? I don't know. I'm not as bad as Paige. She's messed up. Or I'm way worse than Paige. She got sober when she was 3, like we're doing that, right? We don't have to compare. What we can say is, have I tried other methods and did they fail completely? So it says these facts appear to be of extreme medical importance because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group. So rapid growth, growing quickly, that means it does not take long to get well. It does not take long to have a spiritual awakening. It's growing quickly. It says in this group, they may mark a new epoch in the annals, I always got to say that carefully, annals of alcoholism. And what does that mean? An epoch is an era of time, and an annal is recorded history. But here's how I visualize it. Have y'all ever seen the movie Beauty and the Beast? Doesn't matter if it's a live action or the animated version. If you remember, Beast has this library. And imagine that library, that beautiful, or any like Library of Congress, I don't know, like these fancy, imagine a library. Now imagine every single book in that library is about alcoholism. And every book on every page says alcoholics are doomed, alcoholics are hopeless. And what it's saying is that there's a new book with a brand new page that says there might just be some hope for people like us. These men may well have a remedy, an answer, a solution for thousands of such situations. You may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. And sometimes people talk about, oh, this is a benchmark line. I don't think it's a benchmark line. I think Dr. Silkworth that is the trust he has in this fellowship. There is no way he would have ever conceived of a silly little drunk like me, or known me like so far removed. But what he's saying is that you can rely on what these recovered members say about themselves. That is the faith that he has in this program of action and what he was seeing. That he doesn't know me, he hasn't met me, and you can rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. might go a minute over. It says, very truly yours, William D. Silkworth, MD. And in the first edition, oh man, I forgot to grab my replica first edition. In the first edition, it said XXMD. He was not named. And as a result, the doctor's opinion was on page 1. And after he passed away, they added his name. And because in literary convention, to include somebody's like writing in the numbered pages, and their name is in the numbered pages, that would make him an author. And so when the later editions went out to the world, it had to get moved to the Roman numerals because it's Alcoholics Anonymous, not Alcoholics Anonymous, and also Dr. Silkworth, because he wrote a thing, you know? So that's why it got moved. Just if you're ever wondering why, like, hey, this is such an important place to start in the book. But it's in the Roman numerals. Why wouldn't they put that on page 1? So I just wanted to answer that question. So I think that I'm a minute over. And that's a natural stopping place. So we will stop the recording and we can wrap up with the serenity prayer. So give me a second.